Well, I think we're going to get started.
So thank you all for being here today. And we're going to start off. So we start off all our presentations with pre-assessments. So just to gauge the effectiveness of our content. So we're going to start the session with a pre-assessment and again at the end do a post-assessment. So I'm going to launch a poll. You should see it shortly pop up on your screen. So we're going to ask you to take the next 5 minutes to take this pre-assessment. And this is just to have a sense of your knowledge for us to assess if our presentation is useful for you. All right. And if you have any questions, let me know in the chat. This is a 1-minute warning. The poll will close in 1 minute. Okay, please get your responses in. I will close the poll right now. Thank you for everybody who participated. And then we will do this assessment again at the very end of this webinar.
Let me review the objectives for this presentation. So at the end of the session, you will learn about the different federal, state, and school-based financial resources available, understand how students access financial aid resources, and how financial aid offices build cost of attendance budgets and prioritize aid awarding. You will also understand how aid is awarded. And lastly, we will have time for questions and answers. There are so many different types and sources of financial aid that it can often be overwhelming and confusing for students to determine what they were awarded by their schools. An easy way to break down the different types of financial aid are these three buckets: free money, borrowed money, and earned money. Free money is the best type of financial aid. This can include grants and scholarships. Borrowed money or loans are also an additional type of financial aid that students may be offered. And lastly, earned money or work study. In the next slide, we will review the different types of free, borrowed, and earned money students may be eligible for. Next slide.
So when supporting students with their financial aid application process, students must know where the various sources of their financial aid can come from, how to apply to them, and to understand the key features of these different types of aid. So grants come from federal, state, and institutional sources, and this free aid is either need-based or merit-based, and like scholarships, grants do not need to be paid back. To apply for grants, students need to file their FAFSA or WASFA and may require additional forms from their financial aid office. Their other free aid is scholarships, and there are national, state, institutional, nonprofit, and private scholarships available to students. An important feature to look for when applying for scholarships is to make sure, first, there's no cost to apply. If at any time scholarship applications asks a student to pay, that's a huge red flag and an indication of a scam. So make sure that students are aware of this and steer clear of any fraudulent or untrustworthy scholarship sources. When applying for scholarships, students should ask their scholarship providers if their scholarships are renewable and portable. If the scholarships are renewable, that means they'll be able to renew their scholarships for subsequent years. Portable refers to a feature that allows students to take their scholarship with them when they transfer schools or change their major. With work study, they come from federal, state, nonprofit, or public service sources. These type of aid do not need to be repaid, but must be earned and are based on financial need. And students should apply for their FAFSA or WASFA applications and additional forms that may be required from the college or university to apply. And then lastly, loans. There are federal, private, and nonprofit sources for student loans. They must be repaid. They accrue interest and may require a co-signer. Loans may require a credit history check and often are not dischargeable or able to be discharged in bankruptcy. So when students are considering loans, consider a good type of debt or a bad type of debt. Not all loans are made the same. So it's really important to read the fine print to know what type of loan the student is applying for or not applying for, is trying to borrow from if they are considering borrowing. Students to apply for loans may have to file a FAFSA or additional forms. They will have to do an online promissory note and online entrance counseling in order to qualify.
So in the next 6 slides, we cover in depth all the different types of aid available that Trang just described. It is heavy content, so we will point on some of the most important items of each one of them, but I really encourage you that you spend some time learning and familiarizing yourselves with each one of them. What's important for you and students to know is that as long as the student qualifies, these different types of sources of financial aid, right, can be stacked, meaning that a student that qualifies for Pell Grant, for example, may be eligible for the Federal Student Education Opportunity Grant and other programs. So students can receive more than one type of financial aid that you're going to be seeing on the screen. So the first one we want to cover here is the Pell Grant, which is the oldest and largest federal need-based program. It's on your left-hand side of the screen. Students can apply on the very last day of the academic year, and if they qualify, still receive it. This means that schools don't run out of Pell Grants. And I make this distinction because with most all other programs, it's first come, first serve. Once the money's gone, it's gone. What I want to highlight also with the federal Pell Grant, you can see what the maximum dollar amount for the upcoming year is. It is need-based, as I mentioned. Students do have to fill out their FAFSA in order to qualify, and they may receive it for up to 6 years or 12 semesters. And you can see what the EFC cutoff is. So any student with an EFC that is higher than $6,200 will not qualify. The next program to mention here is the Federal Student Educational Opportunity Grant, or FSCOG. That's a mouthful. The current maximum award is $4,000, but I have to tell you that in the past at least 5 years, we have not seen any student receiving that much. This is mainly because this program, the funds are allocated per campus, depending on the number of low-income students attending that particular institution and how the school to be receiving this type of financial aid. Again, like Pell Grant is need-based, students have to complete their FAFSA in order to qualify. And once the school runs out of funds, that's it, right? There's no more money to be awarded until the following year. So the federal government, the Department of Education allocates funds per year based on the prior year trend or pattern for that particular institution. The other fund to mention quickly here is on your right-hand side, which is the Educational and Training Voucher Program, which is mainly for students that have been part of the foster care system. The current amount is $5,000, and it has to be used at an accredited college or university or vocational or technical. It's need-based, again, and it can be used up to 15 semesters. There are additional requirements, so we put a link there for you to read and familiarize yourself a little bit more with this program. Okay, let's look at the next slide, and we're going to cover the Washington State grants. So the first one is the College Bound Scholarship, more than grant. And as you may or may know, this is an early commitment of state financial aid to eligible students who enroll in middle school and meet the pledge requirements. This scholarship covers average tuition at public college rates, some fees, and a small book allowance at over 66 colleges and universities and technical schools in Washington. I have to tell you that as a practitioner, I have never seen the book allowance included in a financial aid offer. So I think it was a goal for the program that it was never really implemented in such way. Probably because of lack of funding. So it is, again, a need-based. Students have to complete their FAFSA or their WASFA in order to be considered. It may be used for up to 4 years, and students have up to 5 years post-high school graduation to use it. So a student may take a year off after they graduate high school before they can use it. They will still have 4 more years to use it. It has to be used only in Washington State at one of the 67 Washington State institutions. And usually it works in tandem with the Washington College Grant. The Washington College Grant, one thing that I wanted to mention about College Bound. In the past, students had to register, but with the pandemic, the enrollment has been done automatically. So the Washington State Achievement Council, in combination with OSPI, will actually enroll all eligible students into the program. The Washington College Grant, then what I was starting to say is that the awards depend on the family income, number of family members in the household, and the type of institution that the student will be enrolled in. So amounts vary depending on the cost of institution. So students receive more if they are attending a research institution like the University of Washington or Washington State University versus college or technical college. Students, again, have to fill out a FAFSA or a WASFA. It's need-based, and students can receive it up to 10 semesters. And you can see in the bottom right of the screen to get an idea of what the awards for the 21-22 years are. So we don't have the amounts yet for next year. We will update this information as it becomes available. Quickly cover the passport to career, passport to college and passport to apprenticeship. This is a program, again, for students that are either have been part of the foster care system, are unaccompanied minors, and you can see a little bit of the description on the screen. Students have to complete their FAFSA or their WASFA. It's need-based. It has to be activated before students reach the age of 22, and it expires once they reach the age of 27. Priority is given to students that are receiving the Washington College Grant or state work study. And there are additional services and supports that they can receive through the passport designated support staff that is housed within the college or university the student is attending. The passport to apprenticeship, as the name implies, is additional support that students can receive to enroll in apprenticeships. This program is actually managed by an organization, local organization that is called ANU. That is a link that you can use to inform yourself a little bit more, educate yourself a little bit more on the program. And it covers, occupational specific costs, tuition fees, work clothes, a whole bunch of other supplies that are necessary to complete the apprenticeship program. Okay, next we have work study. So work study is a program that provides students with part-time jobs, mainly on campus, but not exclusively, during the school year, right? And I make that distinction because students can work full-time during the summer, because summer is not a required term that students have to enroll in. So they limit the hours to ensure that students are not working too much and, not having enough time to focus on their studies. It is need-based again, and students have to fill out their FAFSA or their WASFA to qualify. It is paid by the hour. Usually, ideally, the student would be able to find a job on campus that it's related to their career, but not always. So, at times it can be a job that, the student can go do and leave, and all they're doing is earning additional funds, maybe to pay for living expenses, like food or which I did not intend on building a career in financial aid. But as I mentioned earlier, my very first job on campus was in a financial aid office through the work study program. And that's how I built my career in financial aid. It really taught me, the foundation of financial aid. And it allowed me to realize that as much as it was very bureaucratic and paperwork driven, it really merged my values of access and equity, with a career that was very fulfilling. So, you never know. The good thing also is that your supervisor is going to know that your priority is your education. So, they're very flexible when it comes to midterms or finals, right? They understand that you're going to be putting in more time towards your studies, so they can adjust your schedule. And, it provides an incredible opportunity for mentorship, right? To start developing your network. It can lead to full-time employment. Once you graduate, those supervisors can write letters of recommendations for jobs, for grad school, for scholarships. So it's really a fantastic opportunity that also allows students to earn money. So that's all I'm going to say about work study. Fantastic program for those that qualify and are able to use it. Okay, we're almost done, I promise. I know this is a lot of information. The next one I wanted to cover for you is loans. And we're going to separate between good or better loans, not so good, and really stay away from. So the best option here is the subsidized loan. It's a federal student loan that is need-based. It's pretty much an interest-free loan while the student is enrolling classes, because interest doesn't really start accruing until after the student ceases to be enrolled or once they graduate. Students do have to complete a FAFSA, like Trang mentioned earlier, and the interest rate changes every year, but it remains fixed for the life of that loan. So if I get a loan for this year, my loan is going to be at 4.99, and it will be that interest rate until I pay it off. But if I take another loan again next year and the interest rate has gone up to 5.5, that new loan will be 5.5. So I will have two loans with two different interest rates, just to give you an idea of how it works. Again, this is the best possible option for loans. The next one we want to cover with a little bit of a yellow light and say, okay, they're kind of okay, but you should really limit them, is the unsubsidized loan. The unsubsidized loan is not need-based. Okay, so it's important to remember these. The government does not pay the interest while the student is in school. So interest starts accruing with the first disbursements. That's why it has the yellow light, right? The interest rate this year matches that of the subsidized loan. And like with the subsidized loan, students have 6 months after they cease to be enrolled, either because they drop or because they graduate, before they go into repayment. So something to keep in mind if absolutely necessary. The next one, we have it in this yellow category, but when I talk to families, I really encourage them to limit or avoid altogether, is the Parent Plus loan. This is also non-need-based. Interest also, like the unsubsidized, accrues immediately. Parents can take it on behalf of their student. Only biological or legally adopted parents can take it on behalf of their students. It is credit-based. So that means that this is not a guarantee type of funding. Unlike all the other aid that I have mentioned, that as long as the student, qualifies, they can get it. This one is credit-based. So it's very possible that the family applies, and then either if the family doesn't have any credit history or doesn't have a favorable credit score, they will be denied. And what we have seen time and time over, unfortunately, is that this process gets delayed and the family doesn't find out of their approval or denial until after the student has signed up for classes and is enrolled and has already accrued a balance, right? So what we see happening, unfortunately, when parents get denied, is that now the family finds themselves with a balance they cannot pay. So the student cannot sign up for classes for the next term. They cannot get a transcript, right, to transfer to another institution. And this balance will follow them until, they manage to pay it off. So that's why we always encourage students and their families to really do a very good evaluation of the financial aid offer they receive from all institutions, and make sure they know that they have enough money to pay everything, and that they know for sure that this money will be coming for them. The interest rate is much higher. Usually repayment starts right away, but there are options for deferral until the student graduates or a later time. Not guaranteed, but is there. Okay, and then for the last slide, I told you that it was going to be heavy content-wise. The next one, and I ask you to repeat after me, say no to private loans or payday loans, right? And credit cards for that matter. These one really avoid as much as possible because private loans, although they can help make ends meet while pursuing higher education, they should be the absolute last resort or, avoidance altogether. The interest rate is really high. Credit checks, of course, are also required. Just like with credit cards, they're not any recourses for the borrower if they lose their job, if they can't find a job, if they're running into, so I always encourage families to stay away from this one and try to find other resources to pay for college expenses. Of all the different types of aid I just covered, I think there is one piece that is very important for you to know. Trang, if we can move back to the prior slide. So the unsubsidized loan and the Parent Plus loans are the only type of aid that can be used to pay for the expected family contribution. Nothing else can. You cannot use a grant, you cannot use a scholarship, private or institutional or state or federal. You cannot use work study to pay for your expected family contribution. So very important to remember that. Sometimes we have families with an EFC and they want to use financial aid, or they think they can use financial aid to pay for it. They can, as long as they understand that it's only the unsubsidized or the Parent Plus loan that they can use to pay it if they get approved for the Parent Plus loan, right? So I wanted to make sure to clarify that for all of you. Okay, and so with that, we've covered the basic of all different types of financial aid. Please let me know if you have any questions. I see that you have been asking questions, so good for you.
Let's review how students apply for financial aid. Students start this process by completing the FAFSA or the WASFA application. When your student applies for their FAFSA or WASFA and includes the school that they are interested in applying to, this signals to the school that the student may attend their institution. Federal Student Aid or the Washington Student Achievement Council will send the student's application results to the college's financial aid office. One of the most important results of filing a FAFSA or WASFA is the calculation of the student's EFC or expected family contribution. Financial aid offices use the EFC and other information provided in the FAFSA or WASFA to determine what type and what amount of financial aid to award the student. An important thing to note is that each financial aid office has its own priority deadline to apply for financial aid, so students should be ensured to include this information in their college search. Also, although there are general federal and state regulations that all schools must follow, each financial aid office can have additional rules specific to their campus. It's important that you help students find and understand what these rules are. For example, what's the satisfactory academic progress measure for that particular school? How about refund policies? In addition to filing the FAFSA or WASFA, students also have the responsibility to submit additional documentation to the financial aid office, such as verification documents or appeal documents if the student is considering appealing. A student's financial aid will not be considered complete until all documentation requested from the financial aid office is submitted. So make sure students check their emails and financial aid portals often. And we recommend that students search for tax documents way before October 1st. If they're unsure or can't find them, they should request a tax transcript from the IRS early in advance in case they're selected for verification. Next slide.
All right, so as we mentioned, the first step to prepare to apply for college is applying for either the FAFSA or WASFA. And so these forms are the key to unlocking all types of financial aid that we mentioned earlier. So applying for these financial aid applications will indicate to the schools that you are applying, that you're interested in financial aid, and this is a critical step. So it's really important to make sure that students apply for their FAFSA each year. But it's very confusing. Students, it's important students to know that they apply for one, not both. So students who answer yes to any of these questions will file a FAFSA. So if the student is a US citizen, a US national, like those from American Samoa or the Swains Islands, a US permanent resident, an I-94 holder with one of the following designations: refugee, asylum granted, Cuban Haitian entrant, conditional entrant, or parolee. Visa holders against the VAWA Act or under the VAWA Act, or T1 visa holders. So any of those students with any of the following under any of the following categories will apply for a FAFSA. Now, students who apply for the WASFA are the following: students who can apply for the WASFA are students who are undocumented, students with DACA, whether their status is expired or not, other non-citizens, and students can check with their individual college or university to see if they would apply or can apply for the WASFA. Students who defaulted on federal loans or grants, meaning that they failed to pay back federal loans and grants and are no longer eligible to apply for federal aid, but still want to apply for state aid, can apply for the WASFA. And students who don't feel comfortable completing the FAFSA. So this is, for example, students who may be transgender. So the FAFSA currently does not account for transgender applicants or those whose genders do not align with the sex that they were assigned at birth. And so although we find it problematic, some suggest it's best to complete the FAFSA under their legal name and gender marker that is on file with the Social Security Administration. They say this because a mismatch between the Social Security Administration and FAFSA can complicate the financial aid application and trigger a rejection. So changing names and gender markers may take a long time. So we encourage students to start as early as possible. But if students want to complete with their name their chosen name, they can choose to apply for a WASFA instead. Also for students who are US citizens and have family members who are undocumented and do not wish to file a FAFSA, they can choose to file a WASFA instead, because the FAFSA really connects with large organizations like Social Security Administration, right, for example. And so if students don't feel comfortable completing the FAFSA, they can choose to fill out a WASFA instead. And so we just want to make sure that students know all of the options that they have and choose what they and their families are most comfortable with. All right, and so lastly, we want to share with you that effective last July 25th, 2021, there was a new Senate Bill 5194, that made it easier for all Washingtonians, including undocumented students, to meet residency requirements for in-state tuition and state aid. So this bill removed the requirement that a person must earn a high school diploma or equivalent in Washington, and it now requires a high school diploma or equivalent without specifying the location. It also removed the requirement that a person must live in Washington state for 3 years before earning a high school diploma or equivalent. And so now the law requires a student or a person must live in Washington for 1 year or 12 consecutive months before college admission. So this makes it easier for those folks to qualify for in-state aid, and in-state tuition as well. So those are the two categories of who applies for the FAFSA or WASFA applications. All right, so once a student knows which form they are applying for, the next step is to create an FSA ID or WASFA account. So for those who are filing a FAFSA, they will need to create an FSA ID for themselves and one parent if they are a dependent student and if their parent has a Social Security number. So we will define dependent student in the next slide. So the FSA ID is a username and password that is used to log into the U.S. Department of Ed online systems. And it the FSA ID is used as a legal electronic signature that shouldn't be created or used by anyone other than who it belongs to. So students and parents or parents will use their social security numbers to create their FSA IDs. And if the parent does not have a social security number, they do not create an FSA ID. And instead, when asking for the social security number on the FAFSA application, will input all zeros on the application. And for the signature, the parent will sign a physical signature page as opposed to the electronic signature page. Now, for those students that are applying for a WASFA application, they will need to create a WASFA account for themselves and their parent if the student is a dependent student. So to create a WASFA account, the student will go to the wasac.wa.gov/WASFA address, and they will create an account, and they will use their parent's social security number, DACA number, or ITIN number if available, but if not, those portions can be left blank. And just some important tips for WASFA accounts and FSA IDs. So students and parents will need different email addresses and phone numbers to create their accounts. If there are multiple parents or children in the household, or the student or the parent is a student, the parent can use the same FSA ID or WASFA accounts to sign their student's FAFSA or WASFA application. And make sure when creating the accounts that all information matches and is correct, because if it is not, that may cause a delay in their FAFSA or WASFA process.
Okay, we're going to start off with the financial aid refresher, and I'm going to ask for your participation. In the chat box, answer the question. What is included in the cost of attendance? Cost of attendance is the estimated annual cost of attending a particular college or university. And let me review a few answers if they're coming in.
It looks like the chat is disabled, but folks can still use the Q&A. So if you'd like to use the Q&A to let us know, please do. And sorry about that with the chat.
I just made the chat available again.
Okay, we'll move on. When discussing cost of attending a college, it is important to consider all of the costs that may be incurred by attending each school. This is known as cost of attendance. This includes tuition and fees, books and supplies, housing, food, transportation, and any other miscellaneous expense. Cost is affected by many variables. For example, the type of institution the student attends. Are they attending a public school, a private school, 2-year, 4-year, or a trade school? Each type of school can have a different cost of attendance. So the type of school that the student enrolls in will determine the total cost of attendance. Secondly, the student's housing plans may also impact cost. Is the student planning to live on campus or off campus or with a guardian or family member? These decisions will affect their cost of attendance budget. The student's state residency status will impact tuition cost. And when we're discussing residency, we want to clarify that we're not talking about immigration status. We're referring to the length of time the student has lived in the state where they want to go to school. This is why when students attend an out-of-state public institution, tuition costs are higher. And lastly, costs are dependent on how many credits the student is taking. So that's a quick overview of cost of attendance. And later we will share with you a resource that includes all cost of attendance for schools in Washington State for this upcoming school year.
All right, so the next key terms we want to review are direct costs and indirect costs. So let's define each group and talk about why they're important. So first, direct costs include charges that are paid directly to the school, such as tuition and fees, room and board, if the student is living on campus. So that's essentially the bill that the student will receive from the school, the college or university. Indirect costs are necessary costs incurred by the student while attending school, but are not paid directly to the institution. So that's like books, if they are purchasing them from outside sources, right? Any like school supplies, transportation, laundry detergent, for example. And it's important to look for both direct and indirect costs when students are looking at when researching schools and looking at cost of attendance, and especially when students are looking at award letters, because sometimes award letters only include direct costs. But it's important to consider both because indirect costs are also necessary. So when students are shopping and when you're supporting students, it's important that they know how much that item costs in its entirety, right? And so that's the same thing. It's like applying when it comes to award letters. So why are these important? First, knowing the full cost to attend a school for a year should be the student's starting point when they are researching colleges or universities, or when they're looking at their award letters in the spring. And it's important that they know that the financial aid that's awarded to them will cover direct costs first. If there is money left over, then they can use that to pay for indirect costs. And so they would get a refund essentially and use that to pay for their indirect costs. However, if there's not money left over, they may have to pay out of pocket to the university for their direct costs, and then out of pocket for their indirect costs. So there has to be some additional planning there. So that's really important when it comes to looking at the financial aid.
Thank you. So what we are going to cover right now is the formula that financial aid offices use to determine what type and amount of financial aid to award. And then we're going to share with you the formula that we think is more realistic and more useful for students and families to use in that calculation. So how financial aid offices determine financial need is with this formula. They take the total cost of attendance for the year, which is what Criselia covered, right? They develop a cost of attendance for students living on campus, off campus, or with families. Those are 3 different budgets, if you want, that each institution has. And so in that cost of attendance, they include, again, tuition and fees, books and supplies, room and board, no matter where they're living, on campus, off campus, with families, transportation, and additional expenses. To that, they subtract the expected family contribution, or EFC, right? And so the difference is what it's normally called unmet need, right? And that unmet need is what the financial aid office tries to cover or fulfill with the different types of financial aid we covered earlier: grants, scholarships, work study, and loans. What you need to understand and make sure to explain to students is that the EFC is considered the family's responsibilities, right? So this can be a source of stress for families, as this number is not always reflective of the family's really abilities to pay, and in most instances not realistic. So that's why we're offering you the next formula that we think it's a little bit more realistic, it's a little bit less stressful, even if the EFC will still be part of a component that the family will need to figure out how to pay. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Trang to talk to you about.
All right, so the formula that we suggest using with explaining unmet need to students is the following. So cost of attendance minus any free money that they were offered, so grants, scholarships, equals unmet need. And so they can fill the unmet need with loans, additional scholarships they can apply for, right, work study, and pay out of pocket as well. And so again, remember what Maria said about EFC, right? So that portion of their EFC that is in their unmet need can only be paid either out of pocket or with unsubsidized or Parent Plus loans.
Okay, so here we want to present to you a real life scenario to put everything that we just explained to you into practice, hopefully. So this is a student, it's a dependent student with a It's a dependent student attending a 2-year college. The student receives an award letter showing that they're receiving $12,900 in grants. It seems like a nice amount of money. Then we go look for the cost of attendance, and we see that the cost of attendance for the student is $18,000, right? So we subtract the 12,900 from the 18,000 using the formula we just described to you. But now we are going to look at the EFC, right? And so this student EFC is $1,000. So this is usually the process. Again, this is the scenario with the financial aid formula, okay? And then we'll show you the same scenario with our suggested formula. So $18,000 cost, $1,000 expected family contribution, 12,900 in grants. Let's look and see what else the student received. That's all the student received. So now the student has an unmet need of $4,100. This is what students will normally see in a financial aid award letter. If the financial aid office has provided all this information in the award letter, which we know cover all these and give you some tricks and tips on how to go about it. But so imagine this is the first time you see an award letter, you see this, and you assume, okay, we have to figure out where that $4,100 are going to come from, right? That is sort of the very simplistic way of looking at an award letter, or the untrained eye, right? We're not calling simplistic, we're not calling students and families simplistic, but the way that the information is presented can be confusing. What it's important to know is that EFC and the unmet need are both out-of-pocket expense for the family. So not just the $4,100 that is listed here. For that reason, we encourage you to use the other formula, and this is what's going to look like.
All right, so here's the other formula. So if you subtract the grants from the cost of attendance, that includes the EFC, right? And so the remaining unmet need is $5,100. So if you subtract 18,000 from 12,900, the remaining unmet need is $5,100. So if you can see from the financial aid formula, cost of attendance minus EFC, right? If you consider the grants, the unmet need would be $4,100. But if we use the cost of attendance minus free money, then you can see there's an unmet need of $5,100, which includes the EFC. And so students and families know that, oh, I have to also pay for my EFC and the remaining of the unmet need as well. And so this is why it's a little bit easier to understand. I think it's a little bit more simple, right? Really, the cost of attendance minus EFC is really a tool for financial aid offices to use to award financial aid, rather than a tool students should use to calculate how much they need to pay for. So that's why we suggest the other formula.
And so how do you guide students and families in thinking how to bridge that gaps, how to cover that unmet need? So there are different sources. As we covered today, not all sources are good, but here to give you a little bit of an idea are subsidized and unsubsidized loans. That is our recommendation to go there, in terms of loans, which ones to look at. Now, remember also work study can cover that unmet need. The reason why it's separated and not added to that formula where we added grants is because work study is not guaranteed, right? The fact that it's listed on a award letter doesn't mean that the student is guaranteed a job and that the student can work enough hours to earn that money. Okay, let me back up a little bit. So the student that gets a work study offer on their financial aid offer will have to find a job on campus, right? An opening. Interview, get the job, complete all the paperwork and orientation, work the hours, and then get paid every 2 weeks, like any other job. So that money doesn't come up front on the first day, like you would see with a Pell Grant, with a Washington College grant, or with a loan even, right? So this money has to be earned. The other thing that you need to think about, and without throwing too much more information at you, is that the pay rate for work-study positions vary, right? So if the student doesn't have a whole lot of hours available to work, and they're receiving, minimum wage, they may not be able to work enough hours in the quarter, the semester, to earn that award. So the offer is there, but it's not always possible, right, to earn that money or to use the whole award. So something to keep in the back of your mind. Other resources that the student can use is, savings they may have from summer jobs, for example, outside, and this is where outside private scholarships come in. And, we should highlight the importance, right, of applying for private or outside. When I say outside, is outside of the school or college scholarships, right? So in addition to the ones that they may receive from the school, it's very important because they come in handy to pay for that unmet need, right? So outside scholarships, savings, work study, and loans are ways to bridge that gap. There's also, although we're not going to cover it today, but for you to keep it in the back of your mind, if the student can reduce the cost of attendance when they don't have enough financial aid or resources to bridge that gap, right, could be another alternative. So for example, working on campus, living on campus, like staying in the dorms and having to pay for a meal plan tend to be a lot more expensive than staying an extra year with parents or renting an apartment and sharing it with roommates. Of course, we're not suggesting in any way that low-income students should forego the opportunity to live on campus, right? It is yet another unfair ask to low-income students to do away with very rewarding, positive, and fruitful experiences like living on campus. But if worse comes to worse, this is an option. Not taking the car to campus, where parking fees are really high, parking tickets are common, right? That could be another way to save some money. So this is, not an exhaustive list, but something to consider. And the last thing that I'm going to mention here, and then we'll open it up to questions, is, we're going to do the post-assessment, is to consider appealing the financial aid office, right? Sometimes the financial aid information that FAFSA representative of their current situation. So students completing a FAFSA or WASFA this coming year will have to use taxes from the year 2021. Maybe finances in the household have changed dramatically since then. So submitting a financial aid appeal is not out of the question. Actually, I would strongly encourage that the student does. Maybe the family has experienced, extenuating circumstances and have, expenses that they normally wouldn't have. And so they don't have that much money left to pay for college. So that would also be a reason to submit an appeal to the financial aid offices. So as much as there are rules and there are formulas, there are always avenues that the family or the student can take in order to appeal their award. And that's all I'm going to say about that right now. Okay.
All right. So one thing before we start our post-assessment. I just wanted to share our financial aid hub right now. Currently, if you go to collegesuccessfoundation.org, highlight under our approach, you can find our financial aid hub. Currently, it's student facing, but we will be adding a staff and practitioner facing side of the hub as well, where you can find trainings for yourself and your colleagues as well. So please be sure to take a look. There on the financial aid hub, you can find recorded presentations, PowerPoints on FAFSA, WASFA, FSA ID, WASFA account. We also have a screenshot by screenshot guide for FAFSA and WASFA in English and Spanish. This will be released on October 1st for this upcoming year, this upcoming FAFSA WASPA cycle. And then we also have handouts on required documents that you need for FAFSA WASPA or special circumstances. So really, truly, if you need any resources for supporting students with their financial aid, please go there. In addition to FAFSA WASPA resources, there are resources on award letters, on loans, etc. So please take a look. And Crescelia posted the link in the chat. So please be sure to bookmark it and come back to us. We'll be updating it throughout the year as we are doing our financial aid content. And if you don't have any questions, have a wonderful day. And thank you for joining us on this Monday.
Yeah, thank you so much. The recording will be uploaded to the website at the end of the month. We're going to have also that cost of attendance that Crescelia mentioned earlier. It's an Excel spreadsheet with the cost for most colleges and universities here in Washington State. We'll have also the PowerPoint available to you. And we are also available to you at any point if you have questions, if you have a particular case that you need help with, or student that you need help with. Thank you so much and good luck to you.